Not only a fan favorite, but apparently one of Gege Akutami's as well. Nanami Kento is a character that stands out from the rest in Jujutsu Kaisen. And the best way to show that is to take a deep dive into his life, his feats, and what he left behind when he gave us all major heartbreak after his encounter with Mahito. As you'd expect, Nanami's story only truly starts when he's a student at the Tokyo branch of Jujutsu High, a year below Gojo and Geto. What was his life like before that? We can't really say, but considering he's an incredibly hard worker and takes care of anyone he can, it's probably safe to say his parents did a good job. Due to there being so few Jujutsu sorcerers, each grade tends to get close. And that's what happened with Nanami and Haibara Yu, seemingly his closest friend at Jujutsu High. In 2006, they partnered up and couldn't have had more different personalities or work ethics, but they got the job done. One of the first important missions for Nanami is when he and Haibara have to work as backup on the Star Plasma Vessel debacle. If it weren't for Tochi's bounty on Riko's life, Nanami likely wouldn't have needed to be in Okinawa at all. But who would complain about getting to be on such a lovely island? A year after that mission ended in a massive failure for the Jujutsu world, Nanami was sent off to deal with a curse, along with his usual teammate Haibara. The next thing we see is a completely disheartened and grieving Nanami, trying his best to keep it together as we look upon his friend's dead body. As it happened, the case they were given involved a curse that was much stronger than anticipated. It was meant to be a grade 2 mission, but the curse was strong enough to be a grade 1 due to being a guardian deity of the area it was in. Geto tried to console Nanami, but it was clear the loss had done too much damage. He wondered why Gojo didn't just take on all the work, so they could survive and not go through this. This is also the first partial loss that Nanami suffers as a sorcerer, having been unable to save a close friend. Afterwards, Nanami continued to study at Jujutsu High until graduation, but then left the world of sorcery entirely. He chose to work in a safer field that involved less risks and the chance of attachment to coworkers. Of all places, the kind-hearted Nanami went into corporate finances. It was mainly so he can build up a large amount of money and then take it easy for the rest of his life in a country with a lower cost of living. Not a bad plan, to be honest. But when you're a good person, it's hard to ignore the suffering around you, right? Nanami did well at work, and was even praised by his sleazy boss for how efficient he was. This led to him training his newer coworkers, but with a very realistic view of what their company did. The only thing that kept him going, it seemed, was his favorite bakery and their delicious food. The cashier there was friendly and nice to him, which is likely why even when he tried to ignore the curse clinging to her shoulder, he couldn't. After a while of seeing it cause her pain and problems at work, Nanami exorcised the curse with a single slice from his hand, not even needing his trademark weapon. The relief and gratitude she showed was enough to change Nanami's mind and push him back into the dangers of the Jujutsu world. I'm sure the disdain that he had for his job didn't help either. Seeing the rich get richer for no reason. Right after helping the cashier, he called Gojo to help him get back into the fold, with the blindfolded man not even surprised at his call. We all know you're a good guy, Nanami. Later on at some point, Nanami started working alongside Ino Takuma, both as a mentor and a role model to him. Eventually, this led to Nanami offering him valuable advice, as well as recommending him for a promotion to first grade sorcerer, after a lot of pestering, of course. Needless to say, whether it's in the Jujutsu world or outside of it, Nanami's always in high demand for his work ethics and skill. Prior to Yuji's entanglement with Sukuna, Nanami had to deal with Geto and his sudden heel turn. On Christmas Eve, no less. At least it would seem sudden to Nanami, who wasn't as close to Geto as Gojo, and anyone else deeply involved with the mission in 2006. The event was called the Night Parade of 100 Demons, when it was actually the release of 1,000 curses in both Shinjuku and Kyoto. The thick of the action was held elsewhere, but for this part, Nanami was able to help his fellow sorcerers by taking down a monstrous curse in Kyoto that had been slaughtering them. This leaves Ino upset that his idol couldn't see all of the fighting he's doing in his own spot. If not for his battle prowess, many more innocents would have died. Not to mention, this is the moment when Nanami was impressively able to perform Black Flash 4 times in a row. This is a huge win for the 7-3 sorcerer, and a record that is only broken by Yuji, the protagonist. But he still only thinks it was due to luck. A while later, after Yuji returns from the dead, Gojo asks Nanami to work with the young prodigy since he'll be elsewhere on a mission. Plus, it's a good way for Yuji to see how a decent person deals with the hardships of Jujutsu society. After the deaths of 3 people require more attention, Nanami and his new student are called to investigate. As they progress, Nanami uses a battle against some transfigured humans to both teach Yuji about sorcery and the basics of his own technique. This is as good a time as any to talk about why he's called the 7-3 sorcerer. Despite not being a well of endless cursed energy like Yuta or a rechargeable battery like Gojo, Nanami has a massive amount of cursed energy to spare. He uses it both to enforce himself, while also using it as an offensive in his technique. At the same time, he's able to control this due to his office man mentality. He'll use a certain amount continuously, but if he has to go overtime, he'll unleash a massive amount more to get the job done faster. And as far as we've seen, he's never really run out in a fight. This is all due to a self-imposed binding vow. And we know that he can use Black Flash like a pro. Something that not only requires intense focus, but some amount of luck. It allows the user to attack within an amount of power that increases exponentially. And all Nanami needs is his wrapped sword and a matching tie to take down curses. But what we really want to talk about is his innate technique, involving a combination of ratio and reveal. With his 7-3 skill, he divides a target into 10 pieces, and then forces a weak spot at the 7-3 point. This division can be anywhere from a leg, an arm, or even the enemy's head if Nanami wants. Pretty simple, right? Well, that's when the binding vow with him keeps most of his cursed energy in check until a certain time comes in handy. In that case, Nanami can designate non-living items with weak points through a technique called collapse, and destroy them in seconds. And let's not forget how many Jujutsu sorcerers become stronger through revealing their technique. This is due to allowing your opponent an advantage through knowing important details and gaining a power boost in exchange for that minor weakness. Back to the story, during the Mahito arc, we also see how Ichiji has healthy respect for Nanami and even worries about being scolded by him when he loses track of Yuji. Their bond comes into play again later. After investigating some things solo, Nanami encounters Mahito directly and knows he's a large enough threat through experience. As cold as Nanami seems, Mahito's manipulation of human bodies gets to him, despite saying otherwise. At some point, he's touched by Mahito, and that's when he has to get serious, unleashing his overtime. Nanami makes quick work of Mahito's legs and leaves him to be buried in the tunnel. He's painfully aware of the partial loss to the special grade curse, but he has no choice to retreat due to his injury. This, if nothing else, points to an unavoidable rematch. Later on, Junpei is transfigured, and Nanami arrives to aid Yuji with both the fights and his grief. As they face Mahito, Nanami admits that he's not able to truly injure the curse, but Yuji can, and so he'll back him up. For the most part, the fight's going well, until Mahito's able to push himself further and unlock his domain expansion. Knowing Yuji is a landmine due to Sukuna's soul, he takes only Nanami inside. With nothing but the end in sight, Nanami resigns himself to accept his fate, and then his mentee breaks in like a psychopath and saves his life. This battle is another partial loss for Nanami, who ends up surviving, but nearly dies from the guaranteed hit that was coming for him. Not to mention that Mahito escapes, managing to live another day. If not for Nanami's worry about Yuji passing out, maybe old Patchface could have been finished off. Going forward into the Shibuya arc, on Halloween, Nanami's team includes Megumi and Ino, and put on standby outside the Veil, with Gojo going in alone. That was already a mistake, if you ask me, but I guess hindsight's 20/20 at this point. Through no subtle means, Nanami finds out Gojo's been sealed and enters the fray at last. If only it hadn't gotten to that severity so quickly. Split off from Megumi, who takes care of a severely injured Ino, Nanami discovers a number of dead and brutally stabbed managers. We're talking the non-combatants like Ichiji. Speaking of which, Nanami's blood all but boils when he sees the awful state of that man. It even briefly reminds him of the loss he felt with Haibara so many years ago. An enraged Nanami seeks retribution, stalking through Shibuya like a villain himself. His wish is granted when he comes across a dazed Nobara, and Nita Akari being tortured. Oh, and the man who stabbed Ichiji in the flesh. Nanami makes the quickest work of Shigemo Hiruta, using blows that break walls and cut off the power. Unlike his battles with Mahito, there's no denying how insanely powerful Nanami is here. Flawless victory is what you'd call it. Still, Nanami comes back to himself after the task's done, telling the two younger girls to head back to safety. Even without encountering the threats yet, Nanami can tell that the battle requires people of grade 1 or higher to even continue. And he's definitely not wrong. But boy, do we wish that he was. As Nanami goes further into the thick of things, his partners switch to Maki and a partially drunk Nobito. But at least they're both amazing at what they do. On the other hand, they don't expect to encounter Dagon, who evolves from a curse womb to a full-fledged special grade curse. Not unlike his match against Mahito, when things seem too easy, Dagon unleashes his tropical island domain. Can nothing go Nanami's way? Anyway, the slew of aquatic beasts Dagon controls come after him, getting to Nanami first. He seems to be buried and devoured by them, but never stops fighting back. Eventually, Megumi busts into the domain to aid them, and Nanami rushes to cover the younger sorcerer. Once again, priorities for our 7-3 sorcerer always involve taking care of those younger than him. At this point, Nanami's bleeding a lot, but still fighting well. He does seem to have a nasty injury to his eye that's closed, or is it missing? Either way, he's doing better than Nobito, who lost an arm. After some struggling, Megumi opens up an escape route, but his deceased father pops inside instead. Nanami can tell that they should rely on him. After Toji makes sashimi and frees them from the domain, Jogo shows up for revenge. And who's his first victim, you ask? Nanami. Engulfed in flames so quickly he has no time to react, it seems like it's the end for Nanami. But it isn't. He gets back up, half alive at best, pondering his dreams of the vacation island in Malaysia he'd love to be on. Despite wanting that more than anything, he knows he has to find the youngest ones first, Megumi and Maki. Instead, he encounters transfigured humans left by Mahito, and wouldn't you know, this is round 3 with Patchface. But this time, there's no competition, no chance for Nanami to get out alive or even to fight his fate. He's too tired. He's burnt and bleeding. He's done. There's one last thing he has to do, though. Make sure Yuji, if no one else, can take his place. And as he sees Haibara again, he tells Yuji just that. He knows he can't say anything negative because that would curse him. Mahito wastes no time blowing him into pieces, leaving Nanami's weapon next to his pants on the bloodied ground. His manner of death does leave trauma for Yuji, but Nanami's words also resonate with him after his passing. When Yuji's getting too emotional during his battle, Nanami's a steady reminder of what Jujutsu sorcerers go through, and how they must keep fighting and standing up even with intense pain and emotions. It is their duty, as the few who can go against a threat unseen by most of the population in Japan. Nanami's other close partner, Ino, ends up with his weapon after Shibuya, and even tries to use it against Sukuna of all. At this point, I'm going to go into some manga spoilers for what happens with Nanami after Season 2 ends. If you don't want to be spoiled, you can end the video here. Nanami's other close partner, Ino, ends up with his weapon after Shibuya, and even tries to use it against Sukuna of all people. Not that it does much damage. But even in the afterlife, Nanami's there to greet others, like Gojo, his former senpai. Sure, he's back to his look from their student years, but at least he can appreciate the choices he made, and how his schoolmates lived their lives until the end. When Gojo asks about his passing, Haibara admits he butted in to make sure he'd not become a curse, and bet on the future instead. Nanami's other pal, Ino, ends up with his weapon after Shibuya, and even tries to use it against Sukuna of all people, not that it goes so well. In case you forgot how that happened, back when they had just freed Gojo from the prison realm, Ino had collected it,
and asked Shoujo and Ichiji if he could use it in the Shinjuku battle. And like I mentioned, since he had a bond with Nanami, they had no problem with it. Later on, when Sukuna decided to absorb Tengen to compensate for losing the Kamotoke to Higuruma's technique, planning to complete Kenjaku's merger plan, Ino also readied himself. After more of the gang showed up to jump Sukuna, Ino tried a surprise attack, but without using Nanami's weapon, and ended up getting blown away. Kusakabe was actually the one holding the blunt blade this time. We also got a small instance of Nanami admitting Kusakabe is probably a stronger grade 1 sorcerer than he is, or was. One last time, with Ino designated as the one Nanami trusted the most after losing Haibara, he tries to strike Sukuna by combining his curse technique with Nanami's blade, but failed. It doesn't end there though. When Yuji's got him pinned to the wall, he throws Nanami's weapon itself, and it's just the right thing to give them the upper hand. Even though our favorite office worker wasn't there physically, he helped them win with his selfless spirit. And that is the story of Kento Nanami. If you liked the video, please give it a like, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.